Hello, and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live session on the EU delegation Facebook page. We're talking about EU citizens' rights and settled status with a particular focus on students today. So we're going to touch on some of the key issues that students have been asking us recently, and also to talk about some of the pitfalls and things to avoid if you're a student and you want to apply for settled status under the EU settlement scheme. So let's get started. We are going to run through the settled status process briefly. We'll touch on how to make your application, and we'll touch on a few key points as we go on through this presentation. Now, why do you have to make an application to the Home Office for pre-settled or settled status? Well, this is to ensure that you confirm your full residence, lawful residence in the UK, going into the end of June next year. This is because free movement law will end at the end of this year. And as free movement law ends at the end of this year, when the transition period of the UK leaving the EU also ends, you need to replace that lawful residence under EU law with lawful residence under UK immigration law. So you in effect have to replace one with the other. And so in order to get lawful residence under UK law, not EU law, you need to apply for a status in a scheme called the EU settlement scheme. This is an application process that will get you lawful residence in the UK so long as you are a resident in the UK before the 11 p.m. on the 31st of December this year. This is one of the key requirements. You must be residents in the UK before the end of this year in order to be eligible to apply for a status under the settlement scheme. And I'll elaborate on that point in a bit later. Now, let's talk about the settlement scheme itself and what you need to do and how you need to get status from it and what kind of status you will get. Now, there are only one of two statuses you can get out of this scheme. One of them is called settled status, which is a permanent resident status. This is for people who have lived in the UK continuously for 5 years already. If you have been living in the UK continuously for 5 years, you're aiming to get settled status, not pre-settled status. What's more relevant for US students, particularly students who have started courses this year or are going to move to the UK before the end of this year, you're going to be on course to obtain pre-settled status. Pre-settled status is temporary residence permit, and you'll be receiving this temporary residence permit because you will only have been residing in the UK for a short period and less than 5 years. Don't worry, because this temporary residence permit will be granted to you for a 5-year period, and once you've acquired 5 years continuous residence in the UK, then you'll be eligible to apply for the permanent resident status. So the point of pre-settled status is to give people that protection who have been living here for only a short period of time, to give them that protection to allow them to acquire the right length of residence to get settled status at a later date. There are two important deadlines to remember out of the scheme. The first deadline is the residence deadline. This is what I touched on a couple of minutes ago. To be eligible to apply under the EU settlement scheme to get pre-settled or settled status, you must have commenced your residence in the UK before the 31st of December 2020. So you need to have practically started living here. You need to demonstrate that your residence is UK based by the end of this year. Then there's the application deadline. So the application deadline is the 30th of June 2021. This is the ultimate deadline that you need to meet to start and submit your application for pre-settled and settled status. The residence deadline is quite important, and it's a topic of discussion amongst students at the moment. So I'm going to talk about the residence deadline in a bit more detail a little bit later in the presentation. Now, almost all EU, EEA and Swiss citizens need to apply for residence under this scheme. Now, I say almost all because there are some EU citizens, and I'm just going to refer to EU citizens from now on, but that covers EEA and Swiss citizens also. There are some EU citizens who don't necessarily need to make applications under the scheme because they already have lawful residence under UK immigration law, and those are for people who have indefinite leave to remain. And that's mostly for long-term residents, so it's not going to be something that many students coming to the UK now or very soon will have. So if you're coming to the UK now or very soon, you will have to make an application to the EU settlement scheme. It's mandatory, unless, of course, you happen to be a person who already has British citizenship, maybe because of family connections, or because you have lived in the UK previously before and you're returning to the UK again. If you're an Irish student, you don't need to apply, but you can do so if you wish to have another layer of protection for you. And if you're a student and you're coming with your family members will also need to apply. And if your family members are non-European, they almost certainly have to apply, unless, of course, they're British. There are some family members who don't need to be in the UK before the 31st of December 2020, so long as you are. So if you're started your course or you intend to come to the UK before the end of this year to study here, then you must move here as an EU citizen. You must commence your residence before the end of this year. But it's not such a priority for some of your family members to have moved with you before the end of this year. They can join you at any time in the future. But it's only for those family members in the top bullet points here. So this is your spouse or civil partner, or your durable partner. Your durable partner basically means someone you're not married to or in a civil partnership, but you're in a serious relationship and you've got evidence of that serious relationship. Or any of your family members in the ascending and descending line of you or your spouse or your civil partner. Now, those family members don't need to rush to the UK with you. They can, if they wish, join you at any point in the future. So don't worry, but you as a student need to commence your residence before the end of this year. And I'm going to again touch on that a bit later because it's a very important point and there's a few misconceptions around that point, especially as universities are sending through or sending through different messages and which are incompatible with the EU settlement scheme. So once you're here, you need to make this application. And when you make this application, you're going to need to complete 3 key steps to this process. The first one is to prove your identity and nationality. And with that, if it's a family member applying with you, they need to prove their family relationship with you. You'll need to prove the length of residence in the UK. If you've only just arrived or you're only going to arrive shortly, then we'll touch on how to prove your length of residence and what it means for this application. Then you'll have to undergo a criminality check if you're a student that's 18 years or over. So go through those 3 requirements, and if you can satisfy those 3 requirements, then you're on course to getting a status under the scheme. And I'll talk about each of those 3 requirements shortly. The application is mainly online, so it's a fairly straightforward process. And for most students, it's going to be a fairly simple application to make. You're going to have, a good smartphone, hopefully, and you'll be fairly digitally literate. So you should be able to make this application yourself without paying a lawyer to do it for you. My lawyer friends won't like me saying that, but if you're a student, I'm fairly confident you can do this application yourself. So don't go and pay a lawyer to help you with it. It's not necessary. There's a couple of misconceptions I'm just going to do away with right now because these are questions that come up quite a lot with students. And one of the questions is, do I have to apply on the same basis as other EU citizens, and do I have to pay for this application? Yes, you're applying on the same basis as other EU citizens. You're filling in the same form and you'll be asking the same questions. I'll touch on where it's different as we move on in detail in this presentation. The key point is that you need to have commenced your residence before the end of this year to be eligible for it. And the application is free. Now, there's no requirement to hold comprehensive sickness health insurance to qualify for status under the EU settlement scheme. Now, this is a requirement under EU law, as EU law stands now, but it's not a requirement for the EU settlement scheme. So if you're a student, you can get pre-settled status without having to hold comprehensive sickness health insurance coverage. Remember, we're just proving your identity and nationality You're proving your length of residence and that you're resident in the UK, and answering some questions about criminal history. That's how you get your status on your scheme. You don't need to demonstrate your activity in the UK. You don't need to prove what you're doing here. You don't need to prove whether you're working part-time while studying. You don't have to have comprehensive self-insurance. Now, to prove your identity and nationality, if you've got a compatible and modern smartphone, you can download the Home Office Identity Check app from the Apple Play Store, Google Play Store, Apple don't like me saying that, and the Apple App Store. So download it from the respective store, and it's a very easy app to get through. You'll register on it, and then it will walk you through the steps, and the steps look similar to what's on the screen. You'll be asked to take a photograph of your passport details page. You'll be asked to scan the chip in your ID document. You'll be asked to take a scan of your face, and you'll be asked to take a selfie, and that selfie will appear on your status at the very end of the process. So make sure you're all pretty and wearing the clothes that you want to wear for this status, because the photograph is going to be on your status, and you're going to be sharing that status with a lot of people in the future. Now, once you've proven your identity and nationality with that app, and hopefully you've been able to use the app because you've got a compatible device and your ID or national ID card or your passport has a biometric chip in it, then that data will be sent to the Home Office automatically. Then you'll receive an email with a link asking you to log in to your application online. At which point, once you click that link and log into your application online, you can use any web browser. You're not using an app at this stage. So at that point, you can use any web browser on any device to continue the rest of the application process. There's a lot of questions on the application process. All of them are fairly straightforward. You don't need to ask a lawyer about what they mean. Many of them is about talking about who you are, your personal details, your contact details, and so on. When it comes to residence, you're going to be telling the Home Office whether you've been living here in the UK for 5 years or more, or less than 5 years. For many of you, you're going to be choosing less than 5 years because you've only just arrived here, or you will only just be arriving here. This means that the application form itself will be looking and for evidence of your residence in the UK for a short period of time. I'm going to touch on the complete residence definition here for you, because it's going to be important for you, not just now, but in the future when you're aiming to apply for settled status later. Now, to acquire settled status, you need to be continuously resident in the UK for a 5-year period. This basically means you need to be living in the UK from all sides of the UK. This is really important for students, because students, as students, and as a student myself a very long time ago, I had a lot of freedom, and as students we like to travel a lot, we like to move a lot, we like to have some periods of study abroad, and we like to see visit our family back home when we're on holiday. But if you're a student here and you wish to acquire settled status, that permanent status later, you're going to need to make sure that you maintain your continuous residence in the UK. So this means when you get your pre-settled status, you must maintain your residence here by staying in the UK for at least 6 months in every 12-month period. You allow one long absence of between 6 and 12 months within that pre-settled status period, but only for an important reason. And those important reasons are listed here. So if you're studying a course that requires you to study abroad, or you wish to study abroad, you can study abroad, but only for a period not exceeding 12 months. And when you apply for settled status later, you're going to need to include evidence that that long period of absence was related to study. So make sure you retain evidence that you were studying abroad, it was linked to your course, and evidence of you attending that course abroad when you apply for settled status later. So this is really important if you want to achieve settled status. Of course, if you're a student here and you only want to study here for a short period of time, then pre-settled status will be enough, and you don't have to worry about this too much, and you will retain your pre-settled status so long as you've not been absent for more than 2 years. But remember, if you've been absent for more than 6 months, it will just mean you'll be refused settled status later. So it's just about what your plans are, whether your long-term plans are living here permanently in the UK. If they are, you must meet and continue to meet that definition of residence while you're a student and while you're on pre-settled status. Now, I touched on this before. I'm going to touch on this again because this is a really important point for students. You must have commenced your residence in the UK by the 31st of December this year in order to be eligible to apply for and to get pre-settled status. Now, we know there's a lot of universities at the moment that are asking you, those of you who've started your UK course in the last month or so, to stay where you are and to continue your course remotely. Now, this is the message from universities because universities will prefer that you don't enter the UK and we don't have too much movement while we're still under a lot of restrictions due to the coronavirus. The trouble is, the message for universities to stay where you are and continue your UK course remotely will mean that you might miss your residence deadline in order to qualify for pre-settled and later settled status. If you are studying remotely abroad, then please make sure that you remember, if you want pre-settled status, you're going to need to move to the UK and start your residence before the 31st of December this year. If you enter the UK after the 31st of December this year, then you won't be eligible to apply for pre-settled or settled status. You will be required to apply for a student visa under the new immigration system before you come to the UK, which means you're going to have to pay for a student visa, which is currently set at £348. You'll have to pay the immigration health surcharge, which is currently £470. And you will have no guarantee that you will achieve indefinite leave to remain at permanent status in the future because you're on a student visa and you'll need to continue to extend that visa or switch into another visa in the future. So the issues become much more complex if you enter the UK after the 31st of December 2020. Enter before the 31st of December 2020, you can apply for this much simpler settled status process and you will almost be guaranteed to get pre-settled status. So the differences are stark. And if you want an easier time with UK immigration, and UK immigration is not the easiest thing to deal with at the best of times, please come to the UK before the 31st of December 2020 and apply for pre-settled status. Now, how do you prove you've entered and started your residence in the UK if you've only just done it or you plan to do it quite close to the end of this year? Well, for those who have been living here quite a long time, the online application form can automatically check your residence if you've got a national insurance number and you've done some elements of working or self-employment, or you're receiving some eligible benefits. The online form may be able to confirm your residence. But for many of you, you've only just arrived because you've started courses this summer, or you're going to be arriving soon and hopefully before the end of this year. You're not going to have a national insurance number and the online form won't be able to prove your residence for you. This means you're going to need to provide scanned copies of paperwork to upload into this application form to tell the Home Office, hey, I'm here, I've started my residence, please give me pre-settled status. Now, in a lot of cases, a letter from your college or university confirming that you've started your course and you're here studying will be enough. If you've got anything that shows that you're paying for student accommodation, that should be enough. If you've got attendance records for your university, that should be enough. But obviously, some of this paperwork and attendance records might not exist because even though you may be in the UK, you might be studying from your student accommodation on Zoom and you're actually not attending any lectures in person. So what I would suggest, if you're intend to enter the UK soon or very close to the deadline, you can ask for your passport to be stamped on arrival by the border agency. This will mean that you will not. You should avoid using the e-gates. You should instead queue up to speak to a border agent at the border. What you'll be asking them to do is to ask for a by request stamp on your passport to confirm your entry into the UK. Now, you might get some puzzled looks from the border agents because they're not too clued up on this ability for you to ask for stamping your passport. This is because it's been drummed into them for a long time that EU citizens are free movement. EU citizens should not have their passport stamped. And that's correct, EU citizens should not have their passport stamped. And they can't force a stamp in your passport, but you can request one from them from your own violation. So this means that you may need to persuade this border agent that you are entitled to this stamp and they should stamp your passport. So you'll have to be quite persuasive with them if you face some puzzled looks when you're asking them for a stamp and you're an EU citizen and you don't need a stamp. So be polite, tell them that you know I can ask for one and you can put a stamp in the passport and you can write over it with pen to say that it was by my request. And the key is to be patient with them and to be polite with them. And if you're patient and polite with them, they will give you a stamp. And once they stamp it, they'll write in afterwards that it was by your request, so they can cover themselves that they've not forced a stamp in your passport for you. If you get a stamp in your passport, that confirms your entry, and that there's clear evidence that you've entered the UK, and as well as you can provide other paperwork to show that you've started your course, or you can get a letter or from your college or university to confirm that you're here. If you have this will be enough evidence to prove you've started your residence in the UK and you'll be on course to get pre-settled status. Now, when it comes to criminality, this is a forward process, I hope, for the most of you. And this involves answering a few questions about criminality. It's not about providing evidence or paperwork, unless, of course, you do have some serious criminal offending in your past. You're going to be asking questions about serious criminal offending, and not just offending in the UK, because if you've only been here a short period, hopefully you don't have any offending in the UK. But it also asks questions of any offending anywhere in the world. So it will ask you questions about whether you've got any criminal records in your home country, which were acquired before you travelled to the UK. And our Home Office are looking for people that pose a security threat. So it is serious offending. And by serious offending, what the Home Office are looking for are those offences that attracted a 12-month prison sentence or more, or a series of persistent offending which looks like you're not someone who's learning their lessons. So if you've got something serious, you need to disclose this. If you run into these questions and you're not sure whether your offence is serious enough to disclose, again, don't ask a lawyer this question because a lawyer is going to charge you. They're going to charge you for the advice. In 99.9% of the cases, the offence is not going to be serious enough. It won't have an effect on the outcome of your application. So if you're not sure whether it's something you should disclose or not, just disclose it. That's really the key here, key part in this process, is disclosure is more important than failing to disclose something you should have done. Because if you fail to disclose something you should have done, the Home Office will refuse your application, they won't trust you, and then you're going to have to appeal this decision, and an immigration judge will need to trust that you just made a mistake, an honest mistake here, rather than you try to hide something which you were not happy about or you were worried about. So disclose if you're not sure. Don't pay a lawyer to ask this question for you. Now, once you get through this process and you click submit, you're going to receive an email from the Home Office to say, thank you for your application. This is your long application number. This application number is evidence that you've made an application. So if you haven't received an email with an application number in it, then the chances are you haven't submitted your application yet. So go back online and make sure you submit it. Once you do get an application number, that's evidence that you've made your application. And then once you've got evidence that you've made the application, then you can use that application number to contact the Home Office if you require any more information or you need some updates on the progress of it. When it's successful, you receive another email from the Home Office with a PDF attached letter to it saying, congratulations, this is your status, and the letter will contain information about what your status means. It will also contain information on how to access your status. Now, it's going to contain information on how to access your status because your status will be digital, and I'll touch on that in a bit later. For most of you who are students who are just arrived or will be just arriving, you will be getting pre-settled status. This is a limited status, as I touched on earlier. It's going to be granted for a 5-year period. It will expire at the end of that 5 years. So you must maintain your continuous residence in the UK if you want to get settled status, and you must make sure you apply for settled status before your pre-settled status expires. This is really important. You must apply for settled status before your pre-settled status expires. It doesn't automatically convert to settled status. So you're going to have to go back to downloading the app like you did before, fill in the online form like you did before, send in evidence of your residence like you did before, and click submit like you did before. You're going to have to do the whole process again in order to get settled status. Also, you must maintain your pre-settled status, so that means you can keep to those continuous residence rules, and also make sure you're a good resident, so don't get into trouble, because if you get into trouble, then you risk losing your pre-settled status, or you risk being refused settled status later on if you apply for settled status later on. Eventually, you're going to be eligible to apply for settled status. So if you're a student here and you intend to reside here long term, then maintain your continuous residence, and before your pre-settled status expires, apply for settled status. And then you'll be able to settle status, and I'll talk about what settled status means in a second. But your pre-settled status and later your settled status will be a digital form. This means you will not get a physical document. Only your non-EU family members will get physical documents for the moment. Your non-EU family members will eventually get digital statuses only because the Home Office intends to phase out physical documents for everyone. So you will have a digital status, and the letter that you will have received when you get the success email from the Home Office will have the link on how to access your digital status. But you can use Google. You can use Google and just Google log into my settled status, and you'll find the page in Google, or any other search engines. I'm not affiliated with Google. And once you log into your digital status, you'll see that selfie that you took originally on using the app, and you'll see your personal details, you'll see your ID document details, and you'll see what this status means and what your rights and entitlements are. From July next year, you're going to be required to share this digital status with third parties, and this includes your university or college if you intend to study further courses. This includes employers if you intend to take up employment. Up until July next year, you don't and shouldn't be asked to present your digital status. Your passport or national ID card as an EU citizen will be the only form of evidence you'll be required to provide to demonstrate that you have rights and entitlements in the UK. But from July next year, you're going to have to share your digital status with third parties. This means you're going to have to give them a secure link to your status, and they're going to have to view it on their device. The email and the PDF letter that you receive from the Home Office is not evidence enough. They will be required to log in and view your digital status on their device. Now, once we get to that point where we've been residing here for 5 years continuously, we'll be on course to apply for settled status. It's different for Swiss citizens. There's a difference for Swiss citizens, and I'll touch on that in a second. So, as I said before, once you've been living continuously in the UK for up to 5 years, then you can apply for settled status. So that means doing the same application process again and submitting it before your pre-settled status expires. And then once you get settled status as a permanent status, you are, in essence, free from immigration control. This means you will not be required to make any more immigration applications, but you will be required to keep your settled status, digital status, updated with any changes of personal details or changes of your ID documents. When you get that settled status, you'll have a much freer time. You will be able to move a bit more freely while retaining your settled status, because you're no longer required to maintain that continuous residence rule as you had to do so with pre-settled status. And you can retain your settled status so long as you're absent from the UK for not more than 5 years. For Swiss citizens, there's a difference. They can retain their settled status if they're absent for more than 4 years. This means you can travel abroad, you can take a gap year, you can study abroad, you can live abroad, and to maintain your settled status, come back for a holiday, visit your old student friends, visit your family that may be here, and then leave again. Once you leave again, that 5-year clock starts again, and you can retain your settled status. When you do get settled status is the route to citizenship. So you'll still be able to become British after you get settled status. But you need to have held settled status for a year. Unless you're married to someone who's British, then you can apply for citizenship as soon as you get your settled status. Now, for students, there's a few benefits for applying to the EU settlement scheme and avoiding the future immigration system. And this is why I've stressed quite a few times that it's really important to commence your UK residence before 11 p.m. on the 31st of December this year. This is because by doing so, you will use the EU settlement scheme and you can avoid the future immigration system. This means you can avoid paying immigration fees, you can avoid paying health surcharge fees, and you'll have a much easier route to getting settled status. If you're a student entering the UK from next year, you will be required to apply for a student visa before you travel here. The student visa will only cover for the duration of your course, at which point if you want to stay here any longer, you will need to find another visa to apply for in order to stay here. This may mean taking up further studies and applying for a further visa. This may mean getting work from a sponsored employer and applying for a work permit via that sponsored employer. And so the system becomes much more complex if you arrive after the 31st of December this year. And there's no guarantee you'll be able to achieve permanent residence, because it will mean you'll only be able to achieve it depending on the visas you're applying for in the future, whether you've continuously resided here, whether you haven't got any long breaks in between those visas, and whether you maintain the conditions of those visas. So it's a much more complex process. You want to come here, and if you want an easier immigration system, then come and commence your residence before the 31st of December this year and use the EU settlement scheme process. When you use the EU settlement scheme process, the qualifying criteria and the evidence you need is really quite simple. It's a really simple process to engage with, and you're not going to have much difficulty in meeting the requirements for pre-settled and settled status. So make sure you go through this pre-settled status route. You'll have a much simpler application. You won't need a lawyer to help you with it. If you enter after the 31st of December this year and you need to apply for a student visa, you probably do need a lawyer to help you, because the immigration system is much more complex in that scenario. If you enter the UK and start your residence before the end of this year and you get pre-settled status, then you will have access to home student fees, subject to meeting the other qualifying criteria that exists today for home student fees. So make sure you commence your residence before the end of this year. Make sure you apply for pre-settled status. Then you're on course to having student home fees going forward. You do, and if you do that and you avoid the other immigration system that exists if you arrive if you arrive after the end of this year, then you don't need to have to worry about having sufficient funds to pay for your course. You won't have restrictions on the amount of working hours that you can do while you're studying. And if you wish to change your course or you change your university, you'll be free to do so if you're a person with pre-settled status. If you enter the UK after the 31st of December this year, you'll have to apply for a student visa. And if you apply for a student visa, it only permits restricted periods of working during term time. It's unrestricted periods of working during non-term time, but it also depends on the type of course you're studying. If you intend to change your course because you don't like it and you want to switch your course or switch your university, you have to reapply for another student visa. So again, the difference between the two systems are stark. Before the 31st of December this year, it's pre-settled status. It's a simple process. After the 31st of December this year, it's a complex process. It's expensive. You may need a lawyer to help you with it, and there's going to be lots of problems with that system. If you do not complete your studies, you can remain in the UK to work. You can start your own business. So if you come here before the end of this year, if you get pre-settled status, you're free to do what you want when you want in the UK, as long as you maintain your continuous residence, as long as you don't attract any criminal offences. So if you don't like your course and you're on pre-settled status, you can switch your course. You don't need to make another application to the Home Office. If you want to start work, there's no restrictions on the amount of hours you can do. If you want to start your own business, you can start your own business. If you want to stay in the UK after you finish your studies, you'll be able to stay here without having to pay extra student visa fees. but you will need to make sure you maintain that continuous residence period in order to get settled status. Now, I know I've received a lot of questions from students who say, look, I'm only coming to here to study for a short period of time. I have no intention to live here in the UK permanently, so I don't really need to do this. Now, what I would say to these questions are this. If the course ends after the 30th of June next year, you need to apply for pre-settled status. Because if you don't apply for pre-settled status and your course ends in August next year, you will not be permitted to continue your studies. You'll have to leave the UK because you will have no lawful residence to be in the UK. And if you want to try and stay in the UK, you're going to have to make an out-of-time pre-settled status application, and you're going to have to explain with good reason why you're making this out-of-time pre-settled status application. If your course ends before June next year, and you don't have any intention to stay here beyond the end of your course date, then you do have a choice whether to apply or not for pre-settled status. But the thing is, you will need to make sure you leave the UK before the end of June next year. So as soon as your course studies, you need to get ready to leave, and you need to make sure you leave before the end of June next year. Also, your plans today may be completely different to your plans in March or April next year. You may have no intention to stay beyond June next year now, but you may have met someone that you like and you've fallen in love with them. You may intend to study another course. You may have found a job that you like. And then before you know it, you realise that you should have applied for pre-settled status and you didn't because you had no original intention to stay beyond June next year. So what I would say is, just in case, even if your intention is not to stay in the UK beyond June next year, I would say just in case, apply for pre-settled status. Because your plans may change, and students, as a student, and I'm thinking back a long time in my lifetime, as a student, a lot of things change as a student, a lot of things happen, and your plans are constantly changing and evolving. So apply for pre-settled status. This secures your residence beyond June. This means you're a little bit more freer with your plans, and you don't have to worry about your immigration status until it comes time to apply for settled status later. And if you do have pre-settled status, this means your family members may be able to join you under the EU settlement scheme and not under the new immigration system, which attracts its own fees, its own eligibility requirements, and is much more complex. Now, I'm going to touch on refusals, only because you need to know this, and I don't want to scare you if you do. I don't want you to get too scared if you do receive a refusal, because people are being refused. The number of refusals are low in comparison to the number of applications being made. And if you do receive a refusal, you can remedy this, if you are able to remedy this, by making another application, and you can reapply as many times as you like before the 30th of June 2021, so long as you commenced your residence before the end of this year. So if you are refused, the Home Office will give you an email with a letter attached to it that explains your reasons for refusal. Look at them, see if it's something simple you can remedy, and then apply again. For example, maybe you didn't provide them with extra evidence and they contacted you for this, and you just didn't reply or didn't realise they contacted you for extra evidence and they refused you. Reapply with that extra evidence, and you will be able to get your pre-settled status without any issues. If you are refused and it's a complex refusal reason, then I would say maybe it might be an opportunity to talk to a lawyer at that point to see whether you need extra additional support. Now, I touched on missing the deadline earlier, and I really don't want anyone on this session to miss this deadline. Because if you miss the deadline to apply for pre-settled status by the 30th of June 2021, you're going to then have a period of unlawful residence in the UK. And you're going to continue to have a period of unlawful residence in the UK until such time you apply for and are granted a status under the EU settlement scheme. You're also going to have good reason why you're applying late, and the Home Office are going to have to accept that reason is good enough to explain the delay in your application. So you're going to need to explain with evidence, why you're applying late. And we're not yet sure whether the Home Office are going to accept the excuse of I forgot or I didn't know as a good reason enough for late applications. So please make your application. Please make your application the earlier the better. It's much better that you get these applications in as soon as possible. And I would recommend most people to apply for this before the end of this year, because it will make next year a much simpler process administratively for you if you've applied before the end of this year and you get status under the scheme as early as you can before in the start of 2021. So while you can apply late, it's a much more complex process. Your course and studies will be interrupted. You won't no longer be able to take that part-time job that you've taken, and you're going to have a lot of interruptions in your ability to live in the UK. So please make sure you apply before the deadline, and please apply even if you think you're not going to stay here beyond June next year. Just please make your application for pre-settled status. It does you no harm in obtaining pre-settled status, even if you intend to leave and you have no plan to live here permanently in the future. Now, there's a lot of information and support available, and I'm going to touch on a bit of useful information and how to find extra additional support if you need it. Now, there's some interesting stats on the scheme, and we're going to just run through some headline stats just to give you some confidence that when you make this application, you should have no problems in obtaining pre-settled status. You can see at the end of July this year, there's been 3.8 million applications to the scheme, of which there's been 3.5 grants of statuses under the scheme. So the huge majority of people who are applying are getting a status under the scheme, and the majority of people are getting settled status. So it indicates that the majority of people are getting the right statuses under the scheme. There's only been a small number of outright refusals. There's been a higher number of void or withdrawn or invalid applications. These mean basically some people who applied to the scheme were not even eligible to have done so. So these statistics give you a bit of confidence that you can do this application yourself, and you should be able to get your pre-settled status. There's a lot of available information and resources which are run or contracted out by the Home Office. The Home Office have a settlement resolution centre, which is basically a call centre and an online inquiries form, which you can contact to ask questions about the application you're making, or to ask questions about the progress of the application you've made. The Home Office also are funding charities and voluntary organisations to assist the more vulnerable citizens through this process. Now, I hope and suspect many students won't fall under this vulnerable category, but if you think you do, organisations either on the .gov.uk website, so Google Help EU Settlement Scheme voluntary sector or grant funding sector, and you'll find this page on the Home Office website, or go to the EU delegation website called EUSS.uk and use the postcode finder there. Currently, the list on the Home Office website is being updated because they've just gone through a recent round of funding for these organisations, and so they're still compiling a list of those who were successful in this round of funding. The funding is up to March next year. We don't know if the funding will continue beyond then. The Home Office also have this assisted digital service. This is a service that helps the more IT illiterate to make their application. It doesn't provide legal advice. It just helps people make and submit their digital application. The European Commission has a series of leaflets. They're available on the Publications Office website, and you'll be able to download it from a link on these slides, and you can get an access to these slides on our website. Or you can just Google European Commission Publication Office, EUSS information leaflets, and we'll shortly have a leaflet designed just for students and young citizens that will be available soon on the website to download, and also hard copies by request. The delegation to the European Union and UK